This video will cover the endocrine system, which is one of the two regulatory systems involved in maintaining homeostasis in the human body, the other system being the nervous system. Now remember, homeostasis is the condition in which the body's internal environment remains relatively constant. We're going to be looking at the endocrine glands along with the endocrine hormones. Now remember that the endocrine glands are going to be made up of ductless glands that secrete their secretions directly into the blood. And this will affect the cell activities by releasing chemical messengers in the form of hormones directly into the bloodstream. The target cells will vary and they will be located all over the body. The hormones will control generally between minutes to hours, and the length that they occur can change, and it depends upon the metabolic activity of the target cell. Now, when we look at the various hormones that are secreted by the human body, hormones will be secretions of the endocrine tissue, and they will be transported in the blood. They will signal influences that will have a wide variety of body functions, and that can range from bone growth and muscle growth to concentrations of glucose in the blood. The hormones are typically broken down into two groups: the amino acid based. Now these amino acid based are going to be molecules that will range from small amino acids to very huge proteins. They are typically water soluble, and most of the hormones will fall under amino acid based hormones. The second grouping of hormones are the steroids. These are derivatives of cholesterol. They are lipid soluble, so they can cross the cell membrane, and this will include only the gonads and some of the adrenal hormones. As far as the mechanism of hormone action, since hormones are released into the circulatory system, virtually all the tissue will be exposed to them. The ability of the cell to respond to a hormone will depend on the presence of large protein molecules called receptors. Now we use this as an analog of a lock and key mechanism. And the way it works is that they will bind with specific hormones and not others. The combination of the hormone and the receptor activates a chain of events, and this results in a hormone effect. A single type of hormone can have different effects on different cells because they might be either different types of receptors, or varying in the quantities of receptors produced, or varying in the magnitude of the effects. The two major types of receptors are the plasma membrane receptors that are found on the cell membrane, and the intracellular receptors found within the cell. And they will react with hormones that enter the cell membrane and generally will initiate a stop or start of protein synthesis. Okay, so as we look at our hormones, a hormone in general will affect one of the following areas. It can cause a change in membrane permeability. It can start or stop protein synthesis. It can activate or deactivate enzymes, or it can induce or stop secretion activities. So our endocrine glands are pockets of hormone-producing tissue that will be found in the brain, the stomach, the heart, the small intestines, and the placenta. Beginning with the pituitary gland, also known as the hypophysis. The pituitary gland is located in the sella turcica of the sphenoid bone and is attached to the hypothalamus of the brain by a stalk-like structure called the infundibulum. It regulates many body activities, especially other glands. And so the pituitary gland is often called the master gland of the body. The pituitary gland is divided into an anterior lobe and a posterior lobe. The anterior lobe is known as the adenohypophysis, and the posterior lobe is known as the neurohypophysis. The anterior lobe makes up about 75% of the mass of the pituitary gland, and it releases 7 different hormones. The posterior lobe is known as the neurohypophysis, and it is not really a gland, it's a storage area for secretions of the hypothalamus. Here we can see the location of the pituitary gland in the sella turcica of the sphenoid bone. Remember that the pituitary gland is divided into an anterior portion and a posterior portion. The anterior pituitary gland is known as the adrenal hypophysis, and it releases 7 hormones. The first hormone is follicle-stimulating hormone, abbreviated FSH. It regulates hormonal activities of the gonads, such as sperm or egg production, ovulation, estrogen, progesterone release in females, and testosterone release in males. The second hormone that we'll look at is LH, known as luteinizing hormone, and it regulates hormonal activities. Basically, it does the same as above. ACTH is known as adrenocorticotropic hormone. It regulates the endocrine activities of the adrenal cortex region. TSH is known as thyroid stimulating hormone. It is a thyrotropic hormone. It functions in growth and activity of the thyroid gland. GH, growth hormone, or SRH, or somatotropin, functions in metabolism and body size. It stimulates growth through protein synthesis, and in deficiency we would see a form of dwarfism. LTH is the luteotropic hormone, also known as prolactin, and it causes lactation of the mammillary gland. MSH is known as the melanocyte stimulating hormone, and currently no significant functions have been identified in humans. However, they believe that it may be a precursor to several other hormones and possibly causes darkness of the skin. The posterior portion of the pituitary gland is known as the neurohypophysis. It stores and secretes 2 hormones. Again, its secretions are typically from the hypothalamus. The first hormone is oxytocin. This functions in uterine contractions and mammillary glands due to smooth muscle contractions. When a woman has their labor induced, it is an artificial form of oxytocin known as pitocin. ADH stands for antidiuretic hormone. It is a vasopressin. It functions in increasing blood volume and pressure. It also will constrict the blood vessels, and it'll affect the kidney tubules, causing them to reabsorb water. When one drinks too much alcohol, this can block the function of ADH, and this is why individuals who drink a lot of alcohol will need to urinate frequently. The pineal gland is found in the center of the brain. Its function is mostly a mystery. However, it does secrete one hormone, melatonin, and this may be involved in circadian rhythms. Some individuals will take melatonin pills in order to help them sleep at night. The thyroid gland is located below the larynx and is composed of spherical bags called follicles. The follicle walls are simple cuboidal epithelium and are called follicular cells. The follicular cells will produce and store the thyroid hormone in the follicle as thyroglobulin and in a gelatin state called a colloid. The cells outside of the follicle wall are called parafollicular cells. Thyroid disorders can include hyperthyroidism. Now, a characteristic of hyperthyroidism would be an abnormal metabolic rate. The individual could be sensitive to heat. They could have a restlessness or could be overactive. They could appear to be mentally alert. Their eyes may protrude. They may be irritable due to a sensitive nervous system. And they may have an enlarged thyroid known as a gouter. We can also have individuals who are hypothyroid, meaning they do not release enough of their thyroid hormones. The characteristics of a hypothyroid individual would be a low metabolic rate, abnormal sensitivity to cold, physical sluggishness, poor appetite, appears mentally dull, swelling of body tissue, or a tendency to gain weight. Now, do be aware that an individual does not need to have all of those symptoms in order to have hyperthyroid, or hypothyroidism, and a blood test would be needed to confirm either diagnosis. There's also the parathyroid gland. The parathyroid gland are tiny glands located on the posterior surface of the thyroid gland, and the parathyroid gland secretes one hormone. A disorder associated with the parathyroid gland would be hypoparathyroidism. The blood calcium could drop, nervous system excitability, muscles could have cramps, the individual could have seizures, a person could die due to respiratory failure. Treatment is typically large doses of vitamin D and calcium. If an individual is diagnosed as hyperparathyroid, the blood calcium is high. They may have a nervous system that's depressed. They may have muscle contractions that are weak or sluggish. This condition usually is caused by a tumor. Bones can be deformed, and soft tissue can be an issue as well. There are 3 hormones that are secreted by the thyroid gland. The thyroxine, or T4, deals with body metabolism, and it is secreted by the follicular cells. Now, these follicular cells are these donut-shaped cells or simple cuboidal epithelial cells that you'll see located right in that area. The second hormone is calcitonin. It decreases the calcium levels. It is antagonistic against the parathyroid's glands attempt to increase calcium, and calcitonin is secreted by the parafollicular cells, which are these clusters of cells that you see right in that area. Notice that they do not form part of the follicle or the donut structure. The third hormone is the T3, which affects almost every physiological process in the body, including growth, development, metabolism, body temperature, and heart rate. The parathyroid gland secretes one hormone, and that is the parathyroid. And if we look at this diagram right here, these areas right here are the thyroid gland, and when we see the thyroid gland, these are this at a lower power. This area right here is all the parathyroid gland. So this secretes parathyroid, which increases calcium levels by increasing absorption in the kidneys and the intestines. If it's functioning improper, the result is weak, brittle bones. The thymus gland is located below the thyroid gland and superficial to the heart. It's a large gland in infants, but it diminishes in size with age, and by around age 35 is completely gone. It produces one hormone known as thymosin, and thymosin is used for the production and programming of T cells in immunity. The pancreas is located behind and inferior to the stomach and has both endocrine and exocrine functions. Thus, it's called a mixed gland. Abnormalities of the pancreas are associated with various forms of diabetes. The endocrine portion of the pancreas consists of clusters of cells called the islets of Langerhans, and that's this lighter area right here on this slide. Now, the islet of Langerhans consists of 2 types of cells. You cannot differentiate these cells, but it is by location. In the center portion, we have the alpha cells. The alpha cells secrete glucose, and glucose increases the blood sugar levels. In the outer edge area, we have the beta cells. The beta cells secrete insulin, and this decreases blood glucose levels. In addition, the exocrine portion of the pancreas is this outer area, and the cells in this outer area are known as acini cells, and these have various secretions that function as enzymes for digestive purposes. The adrenal gland is located on the superior surface of the kidneys. Now, it is composed of 2 distinct layers. These 2 distinct layers are the adrenal cortex that we see in this area here, and the adrenal medulla found in this area right here. The adrenal medulla is the center portion of the gland, and the cortex is this outer area composed up of 3 rings. The adrenal cortex is subdivided into the zona glomerulosa, which is the outermost layer. The middle layer is the zona fasciculata, and the innermost layer is the zona reticularis. And each of these layers secretes different hormones. The hormones secreted by the adrenal medulla are the epinephrine and the norepinephrine, known as the fight or flight hormones. Now, these increase respiration, metabolic rates, and constrict the blood vessels. The zona glomerulosa is the outer layer. This hormone secretion is aldosterone, which is a mineralocorticoid, and this regulates sodium ion reabsorption by the kidneys. The second layer is the zona fasciculata. The hormone released by the zona fasciculata is cortisone. This is a glucocorticoid hormone, and it functions in increasing blood glucose levels. The innermost layer is the zona reticularis, and this hormone is a gonadocorticoid, and it is a sex hormone. It helps to control some of the release of the sex hormones. And some of the statements I made on the previous slide I have typed up and placed right here on this labeled slide to help show what hormone is released by each of the sub-areas of the cortex. Additionally, if a person is hyposecreting adrenal hormones, this is known as Addisons disease. It's characterized by low sodium and high potassium and low blood glucose. The person may be dehydrated, they may have low blood pressure, they may have an increased skin pigmentation, they may be mentally lethargic or have muscle weakness or weight loss, death in a few days if not treated. Now remember, an individual does not need to have all of these symptoms, and it was believed that President JFK suffered from Addison's disease. If an individual is a hypersecretor, then they would have Cushington's disease. Here we would have a decrease in protein, we would have wasting of the muscles and loss of bone tissue, the blood glucose would be elevated, they may have puffy skin due to water retention, high levels of sodium, fat deposits between the shoulders and in the face, making an appearance of like a buffalo hump or a moon face, spindly arms and legs, and they would have poor wound healing. Again, these would be some of the symptoms that would be seen if someone had Cushington's disease or hypersecretion of the adrenal gland. With regards to the gonads of the female are known as the ovaries. These are the primary source of the female sex hormones. These hormones are estrogen and progesterone. Estrogen is due to causes the secondary sex characteristics. Progesterone helps with the menstrual cycle. With regard to the male gonad, that is the testes, the primary hormone for the testes is testosterone, and this causes the secondary sex characteristics. We will discuss these in more detail when we reach the reproductive chapter.